It's hard to capture the emotions that occur the moment we find out that news. Whether it's on Shabbos, while you're in shul, or after Shabbos, immediately there's a flood of emotions. There's fear, there's sadness, there's terror, and a lot of other things. And it takes a while to really settle in and start sorting things out and really understand what happened. But after a moment or two, there is a question that lingers beyond the emotion and beyond what happened. And that question is, as they say in Hebrew, Ma achshav. What do we do now? We're sad, we're confused. There's something missing, something very not right with our universe. The entire world has just shaken. And as I'm thinking about this story, I'm reminded of a story that happened many years ago. It was the summer of 1956. It was on a Thursday in a small town in Israel. This is just a couple of years after the establishment of the modern state of Israel. This small town is somewhere between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, next to Ben Gurion Airport. It's called Kfar Chabad. Now, Kfar Chabad then barely got started. In fact, at the beginning, they didn't even have electricity. They were using oil lamps to keep the lights on. And the people that were there inhabiting the town, that were trying to build their lives, these were older people, people that have been through a lot. They've been through the communists in Russia. Many of them survived the Holocaust. And they just came here these past few years in a very, very desperate land called Israel at that time, where things were extremely difficult. And they were difficult for younger people, and how much more so these were older people with families. But the Rebbe, started by the previous Rebbe, insisted that the Chabad Hasidim should come to this town and should reestablish themselves in this town called Kfar Chabad, and that will be the headquarters of Chabad in Israel. And so they did it. After the passing of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe as we know him, continued on with those directions and insisted that everybody should go there and try to build up their life, and it was extremely difficult. There was constantly different type of skirmishes and issues that were going on with the neighboring Arabs, that they were coming in and they were attacking, etc. But it was on this fateful night that something very terrible happened. There were some small boys, a group of boys sitting, studying in the yeshiva in the school, and a couple of Arab terrorists snuck into the kfar, they snuck into the village, and they opened fire on the classroom. And they were completely unguarded, and 5 of those little kids died on the spot, and together with their teacher, who jumped and put himself between himself and the children, and thus saving many of the other kids. And they ran away. And the villagers of that city, they were broken beyond words. Broken is, there is no word to describe what they felt. Each person came home with their family, some of them missing some people in their family, and the common feeling that everybody felt was, this was one big mistake. We got to get out of here, we got to go elsewhere, whatever it is, this is not going to work. Because after everything they've been through their entire life, thinking that now finally we can let our guard down. Now we came to a land that's ours and we can finally live, and to have such a horrible tragedy happen in their very own backyard was something that they could not live with anymore. But they were Hasidim, they didn't decide to go there. So they wrote to the Rebbe. The Rebbe had just assumed leadership a couple of years earlier. Writing to New York, they sent the telegram, and it's not like the state of Jewry in New York was much better. There was a lot of confusion and a lot of sense of displacement. And they wrote this letter to the Rebbe, and they told the Rebbe exactly what happened. and exactly the way people feel, like we're done. There's nobody, it's all coming apart. This was on Thursday night. Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, days go by and they don't hear any response. Every day they show up. Anything from the Rebbe, what's going on? There's no answer. A week goes by and they finally, news spread around the village. An answer came and it's going to be read at the shul, at the synagogue, and everybody should come tonight and listen to the answer. And everybody's coming and they're waiting and this is their last string, their last straw. Like what could one say? What letter could make a difference under such a situation? And they open up the telegram and there's 3 words. The Rebbe wrote in Hebrew, Behemshech habinyan tinucham. If you continue to build, you're going to find consolation. I think it's remarkable on 2 ends because on first of all, the fact that the Rebbe was quiet at the beginning. Now, I can't obviously interpret that or say what that's all about, but it seems that, as Shlomo HaMelech writes the famous words, Lakol Zman Ve'et, everything is a time and a season. There's a time when we just hear what happened and there's no jumping, there's no reaction. There's just a listening and a settling with the news, and that takes its time. It's sad. We don't come up with solutions. But then the Rebbe told them also the hard truth. That if you ever want to find some type of clarity, if you ever want to have some type of context, or understand in some way what happened and fit that into our lives, into our worlds, is one way. Or to put it into the Rebbe's words, by continuing to build, you will find consolation. And sure enough, the next morning, they established what's called the Bet Sefer Lamlacha, a Jewish vocational school there in Kfar Chabad. And immediately the next morning, the villagers came with their hammers and their shovels, and they started the groundbreaking of this new school that after a year was built and was a beautiful school. You see, everything in life is connected. We're all interacting with each other one way or another, from the most minimal things to the greatest things that happen in the world. And I say minimal literally to the point where if we're standing on line at the grocery store, or as they say in California, supermarket, and maybe we're having a hard day, and so therefore we're giving the cashier some attitude, and the cashier, that was the last thing she needed to have that day. So she goes home, and the kids are all excited to see her and ask her to help with the homework, and she's had it up there, so they get some attitude. The homework wasn't filled out in time. They come to school. You see where I'm going with this. And this is the cycle. This is the world that we live in, right? We're each interacting and reacting to each other as things go. But something happens in the middle. You see, why did it start with us giving that cashier some attitude? Maybe something else happened to us, right? So this is a continuum. But there's a choice. You see, that cashier had a choice. They could have at that moment said, you know what, I don't know how long this rotten attitude has been going on throughout the generations, but it's going to stop here. And whatever it is that's going on for this person standing here in line, I'm going to respond with kindness. It's not just one isolated event. That act of kindness put a stop to something that's been going on for a very long time. And those incidents and those situations are things that we face and confront every single day. Whether in small areas or in large areas, and we have a choice to make. And just like these are in issues of attitude or other things, this is really what's going on in the world around us. There's different forces. There's forces of good, there's holy forces, and there's opposite forces. And these things keep showing up at any given time. And the more we invest, and the more we empower, and the more we make a choice that when we see something negative coming our way, we don't respond and carry that on to the next person. But on the contrary, say, I am going to make a change. We are absolutely, definitively changing the entire world and the entire outcome of everything in the entire world. There's something called Stockholm Syndrome. And I think it describes a condition where when somebody is being held captive, so they start identifying with their captors, right? They start buying into it, whatever it is, and it's a very tragic state. And I think it happened because in Stockholm, which is a city, one time there was a bunch of robbers and they hit a bunch of people in the safe of a bank, whatever. It's all Wikipediable, so you'll figure that out. And I think in this situation, we have to really think about that and understand what that means under such a circumstance. Stockholm Syndrome means when the person who's being attacked loses their own narrative and their own sense of who they are, and they start entering into the world and into the conversation of the person that's attacking them. So to the extreme, it's to the point where they literally accept that person and they believe that there's something wrong with them. I deserve this. You're right. But even not to that extreme, to somehow find some similarity or some rationale or some explanation or some commonality between the captor and the captive, that is following that same path. One of the biggest mistakes we can make after a story like this is to not be 1000% clear that there is nothing, there is zero connection, not in this world, not in any world, between people who do the acts that they did and between the people that died al Kiddush Hashem. There is zero connection. And it's not even a match between the horror, evil, and who we are as Jews, as Am Yisrael, the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. For thousands of years, standing up for principles and standing up for what we believe in the face of all type of persecution. And the only response that we can have is to become clearer and more aligned with who we are and what our narrative is, and never, God forbid, get into a whole conversation or get into some type of lack of clarity. Lack of clarity of morals, lack of clarity of anything else, which obviously nobody is, but in the sense of that the only thing this should remind us is who we are. And stick to that script. And the more we remind ourselves who we are and stick to that script, that is really where the war is taking place. And that's the only way we are going to overcome it. Just like I said, we're all connected in one incident that goes on at a supermarket. We're all connected in generations also. In the negative, and how much more so in the positive. And the positivity and the power and the holiness that was established and planted, starting with Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu, going all the way down to our current generation, it's all there. And it's not just a continuation of that story, it's the same exact story. And it's very clear that if we're here, we have a part to play. So if on one side of the aisle there's hatred, then on the other side there has to be an increasing of love. And as Rabbi Berkowitz mentioned, we talk about Avas Yisrael, loving our fellow Jew, Avas HaTorah, loving our Torah, and Avas Hashem, loving God. So, what manifestation of this is, that every person will need to decide as it comes up, and as the situation shows itself up. But one thing's for sure, that when we see this story on the news, and when we think about the 11 people that have given their lives al Kiddush Hashem, the only response that we can try to find within ourselves, beyond the sadness and the fear and the terror and everything else that's going on within us, is those eternal words of the Rebbe, Behemshech HaBinyan Tenuchamu. By continuing to build, and the reason why we're here, continuing to build with that same Kedusha and holiness and positivity, when we continue to do that, then we give clarity. And then we give a power, not just to find consolation, and not just to bring an aliyah, to bring an elevation for the souls of each of these people that passed away, but to ultimately win this war of Galus and bring us to that time of Mashiach when there'll be no more war and no more tragedy and no more terror and no more murder. May it come b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. We're now concluded the program. As I mentioned earlier, I'm encouraging everyone to give a little tzedakah, a little charity as part of the mitzvos, and think what it is we can do to clarify ourselves in our own story as Jews to combat this horrible evil.